Hello, Jordan.
Hello, Harry.
Jen was right. That is a perfect segue. We ended this previous segment with talking about how Minnesota legalized hemp-derived THC. And I love the state senator that was like, I thought it was just a technicality. And I mean, the same thing happened in Texas, basically, but not to the extent in Minnesota because you can put it in beverages, you can sell it on premise. There's a lot. We'll let them talk about that. But I just think that is hilarious that they created an industry overnight and we saved a lot of craft brewers there who Minnesota, I think, is the only state that has harder craft beer laws than Texas. In other words, it's way easier to sell THC beverages than it is to sell craft beer. It's why this company exists. I mean, that's why there's no other replication in any other state. Why am I talking about it before they're even on?
But I think they might be the only 3-2 state left.
That's right.
As well.
Is Minnesota still a 3-2 state?
I don't know. We'll ask.
What's 3-2? You have to enlighten me as the newest
3-2
member
is,
of the beer community.
You can't sell a beer that's over ABV of 3.2 unless it's in a package store.
Really?
Yeah. Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma. If you've been to any of those states before like 5 years ago, you couldn't get high strength beer unless you were in a bar or a liquor store. So it was a real big pain in the ass for the brewers for many years because they had to create two versions of all their beers, like Coors Light, Miller Lite, Bud. They all had 3-2 versions to go into those states. Most craft brewers couldn't afford to create a 3-2 beer just for that. So it gave the big brewers kind of a leg up. And I think that was the cudgel that people used to get rid of those laws. And plus, it was such a drag when you're in Colorado, you want to go skiing, you stop by to pick up a 12-pack, and then after you get back to your place where you're staying, you're like, oh, fuck, it's 3-2 beer, which is non-intoxicating. I mean, it is intoxicating if you drink enough of them, but the reason that there are 3-2 laws is when Prohibition was repealed, there was about a year period where it wasn't completely legal yet, but the loophole that I think Bill Coors or his dad put through was that you could still sell non-intoxicating beer, and they set it at 3-2. So that's why states quickly passed 3-2 laws, and then they just didn't get repealed. So we had these stragglers, and then one by one in the early to mid 2000s, they all got repealed except maybe Minnesota. But yeah, I mean that's why, like, if you look in Colorado, a lot of beer is distributed by wine and spirits houses. Why? Well, because they deliver to liquor stores and on premise.
Yeah.
And that's where high strength beer used to only be sold. They don't even hit grocery stores or C-stores. So that's why craft brewers like New Belgium and what's the other one?
If you notice in the Schilling story yesterday, Bianca, for the data they were citing for Colorado, it was all Colorado liquor because that's the big channel in the state.
Yeah.
Because the grocery, you can sell it there now, but they haven't really shifted over there yet. So the dollars are still going through.
But that's why you get these weird kind of companies in different states. Like this company that we're about to interview, there's no reason to have that in any other state because Minnesota's structured that way. And they opened up a loophole that was not intended. So yeah, these guys probably won't be going out of state. But it is a fun story because it really highlights. Bill Goldring is one that's pointed this out, and he's proving it as we speak, that different business models depend on the regulatory structure. And that's why it's really hard to have a national brand or to have a national idea for a brand or a national process or a national distribution network or a national anything, because you probably want to be in a wine and spirits house in a state that like that, or there's franchise laws for beer in most states, not in wine and spirits. In some states, wine, in some states there are spirits, there are blah da blee da blah da bo da bong. And that's why every state has a different structure. And that's why you can't just say, I'm going to go with AB distributors in all 50 states. Well, you may not want to do that in certain states. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to name a state because then everybody be pissed off at me. But the point is that's why you really have to go market by market and say, which accounts do I want to be in? And that dictates which network you're going to go with, or what your ABV is going to be. Or Utah, you don't want to be over 5%. You're not going to be able to sell it anywhere. So just things like that. All right, let's Bianca, I'll let you introduce our guests.
So today we're talking with Rob Sehllman. He's director of Chill State Collective, and that is a cannabis co-manufacturer and distributor in Minnesota, and they also have their own line of cannabis beverages. And Lisa Hurwitz is co-founder and president of Happi, and that's a cannabis-infused seltzer, and their company is one of 6 members of Chill State Collective, which is really kind of the first of its kind cannabis manufacturer and co-packer. Can you just give us a little explainer of what that is and then why you decided to have this offshoot with Chill State?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I mean, as we've been doing well the past 7-8 years in the beer world, we set off, we wanted to do the same thing with cannabis once the law had passed. And I mean, everything that we have always done with Fair State Brewery has been led with quality. I mean, we have a tendency to like beer flavored beer. And when we launched our cannabis beverage, Chill State, we wanted to launch with more or less weed flavored weed. And we really like to lean into those terpene flavors. And so that is kind of the lane that we chose. And then as we continued, we saw a need for not only education, but for distribution in our state. And so we thought, what? We're pretty good at this. We used to self-distribute back in the day, and we wanted to really more or less kind of form a collective leading with those same efforts of quality. And so every brand partner of ours in the collective really is led by those principles of quality, whether it's ingredients, certainly starts with process, and then of course people.
So what kind of need was there? Was it just a distribution need for companies like Happi, or?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think that we also wanted to lead and work with established brands who have been more or less battle tested in this arena for some time. And we know that with Minnesota, this emerging cannabis space, we really wanted to help bring that quality to Minnesotans. And so yeah, really it was recognizing the need for distribution, but it was also recognizing the need for quality in the state as well too. And really just working with those who are exceptionally good at what they do.
Yeah. And Bianca, as a brand, I'll just jump in here. I think there's a need, as Rob said, for quality, but a need for like expertise and experience in beverage manufacturing when it comes to cannabis. And I'll share a little bit. So Happi actually started in Michigan, and we started in the adult use kind of more highly regulated THC markets. And one thing we noticed pretty quickly is cannabis companies that manufacture are really great at manufacturing cannabis products, but beverage is like a whole different ballgame. I mean, you need canning lines, you need the expertise of like how to manufacture a beverage. And when we met with the Fair State and then the Chill State team, it became really clear to us that one of the things they bring to the table, and I think is pretty unique in Minnesota, is they bring that beverage experience, which as a cannabis beverage company, we have seen that beverage experience actually matters more than cannabis experience, if that makes sense. And so I think there's a part of the need that I really think Chill State is filling is that expertise and experience in manufacturing.
And because it's heavy, and most THC products aren't heavy. And I'm curious, can you kind of fill our listeners in on what you can sell in your state? I mean, I think I just read you can sell on premise. So it's not like only dispensaries only like it is in, I think, every other state.
Certainly. Yeah. Minnesota is unique in that regard. I mean, we're the only state that is playing in the sandbox to where cannabis is allowed to play in that same sandbox with alcohol. So the water is certainly warm. We are, as a result, we're working with a lot of really wonderful companies who are looking at Minnesota for this. So we have an opportunity here to really lead with just responsible hemp-derived laws in the state. And we're hoping that we can be a model, certainly for other states as we continue. So
I think that's great because it just are really, as y'all just mentioned, really tough to distribute. And if it's only dispensaries, then it's almost not worth it. I think that's why you haven't really seen THC beverages take off to the extent that edibles and other consumables have in that space. Am I speaking the truth, or am I just talking out of my accent?
Yeah, Harry, I think it's speaking from experience. Happi is in 2 other states right now. We're in Maine and Michigan. And in both states, the dispensary model wasn't, to your point, it wasn't built for beverage. So I think there's a couple challenges there. Most dispensaries don't have fridges. They typically, dispensaries have to keep, in most states, it's highly regulated. So the THC has to be behind the counter, and it has the vaults that they hold THC in behind the counter typically are pretty small, because if you think about like flower or vape carts or gummies, those are very small products. So there's a lot of challenges just with the retail space from a dispensary perspective. I think the other thing we've seen in adult use states is typically like the first consumers in are super, super high THC consumers. So they want flower that's like testing really high. They want vape carts that are testing high. And most beverages are actually designed for like Happi is designed for a new consumer, right? So we start at 2.5 milligrams, which is low, because we're trying to get new consumers to understand that you can have a THC infused beverage to replace alcohol, right? And so the dispensary environment's just also not conducive at all to that type of consumer experience. And I think what the reason Rob mentioned it, so many cannabis companies are excited about Minnesota is because it's a much more comfortable buying experience to either go to a bar or restaurant and just take it out of the case, or to go to a grocery store or a liquor store. And Minnesota right now is the only state. I mean, it's amazing how much they're leading the way, but they're the only state in the country where you can actually legally buy THC infused beverages kind of in any type of environment. They don't have dispensaries in the state, Rob, right? So it's, except for medical, very small, but I mean, in terms of adult use. So it's actually kind of the opposite of what you in these other legal states.
And I know it's still early days in the on-premise, but what have you kind of seen from the interaction between people having their choice of beer, having their choice of a cannabis-infused beverage? Is it one or the other, or is it a little bit of both?
Well, it is a little bit of both. I mean, but guess what? It works. And that's the beauty of this, is that we sort of tested the waters with there was a THC pop-up tap room that it was just cannabis only. And so you walk into this brewery, what was a former brewery is soon going to become a fermentery of all things fermented. And you walk into a bunch of smiling faces and a bunch of wonderful beverages and music playing, and everyone's just happy. And there were no problems. It was like any other tap room in any other state in America.
There's not like bar fights where people are breaking chairs over each other. And I don't see too many people like getting aggressively violent when they're just occurred to me is that beer and cannabis really do go well together, because beer is lower ABV and it's natural. And I don't know, I feel like that is a natural connection there. They're both from the earth. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is that everything is low potency here, right? So it's not like you're going to a bar, sitting down, looking at the menu, and used to a 20 mil cannabis beverage where like if you don't know, you don't know, and you're about to find out. It's take it slow and really enjoy these. And so that's why it's wonderful to work with Happi, who really just has this low dose space really dialed in with some of their products, and just being able to introduce those flavors out at market, working with chefs, working with bar managers, with their menus, being able to incorporate different flavors of these beverages that really work and help accentuate their food items as well too. So it's a whole fun, like wide open space that we're just enjoying the hell out of.
And the other thing that's really cool is on-premise is like the perfect opportunity for cannabis beverages, because one of the things I talk about a lot is beverages are very different than edibles. The onset is faster, and so many people have had that experience where they take an edible and they're like, oh, this is nothing, right? This is no big deal. And then they take like more, and then they take more, and then it kicks in and you're like, whoa, what did I just do? Right. And then you're kind of couch locked. The great thing about beverages is they mimic alcohol. So they do pair really well in kind of that environment, because the onset is for Happi is anywhere from 12 to 15 minutes. And I think, Rob, we've seen this in a lot of cannabis beverages. So it's actually really conducive to a social setting, whereas an edible, you take one and you sit there and you drink water for an hour while it you wait to kick in. And I think, again, Minnesota's just getting a lot right now, which is exciting.
Yeah. Do you think that'll be a tailwind for cannabis beverages as the cannabis market grows? Is that it is a quicker onset. You can see how much you've consumed. I know edibles were kind of hot out the gate and beverages were a little slower. Do you see people kind of adopting more towards beverages as it develops?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the occasion-based, and we talk about a Happi for every occasion, beverages are just much more conducive to both social, and they work if you're just relaxing and you kind of want that nightcap on the couch, right, in the evening. So I think there's a real case to be made. I think a lot of the challenges to date, Jordan, are what we talked about with, it's mostly the dispensary model. And it's why, I mean, Rob, I haven't seen the data, but I would imagine beverages and edibles came on the market in Minnesota roughly around the same time, right? With the same regulations. And I think beverages just exploded because the places you can buy them and consume them are so much more conducive to that format. Whereas in adult use states, there really are, I mean, a few of them have a consumption lounge here or there, like one or two in the entire state, but there's not that sort of same level of social camaraderie that you find with alcohol. And until that opens up, I think it's going to be those tailwinds. So does a proof of concept model, but a lot more needs to happen in those other states from a regulatory perspective, kind of to open the aperture for beverage.
I think that's a great way of putting it. Open the aperture. And who would have thought, though, that Minnesota would be this bellwether testing ground? And I agree with you. I think this tight dispensary model is just, like you said, the space, there's no refrigeration, the stuff is heavy, it's a huge footprint. It's just an uphill battle, but on premise it's a perfect. Listen, I'm just repeating everything y'all say because that's how I process information. Sorry. But so Bianca, go ahead.
Well, the big question this year, though, is what's going to happen with the law. Do you think it's going to be expanded? I know it sounded like there's some like political reporters who are following it and kind of expect that the on-site consumption piece may be taken away. So is that your read of what's going on?
It's certainly in the bill right now. The way that it's written is that not only there's language currently in there on the manufacturing side, that would be a rug pull for places like Chill State Collective or for other breweries who are manufacturing these beverages. It states that we have to be playing solely in the cannabis space and that we aren't able to produce any other beverages or any like alcohol, for example. And so that's one area that we are currently in discussions with and trying to get changed. The other one, it does touch on on-site consumption and the ability to come into a tap room and you're not able to actually consume right there, which we feel would be really unfortunate just because there's responsible adults, just like they would choose alcohol. There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to choose a cannabis beverage as well, too. So we are currently working with different lobbyists, different groups right now on getting that change. We're pretty hopeful. I mean, that in everything that we have heard from our constituents, it sounds like there might be light at the end of the tunnel. And really, it's just trying to figure out what that proper language is and those give and takes.
It seems to me like it's a classic example of the consumer definitely wants it, the general public wants it, but there's interest. I would imagine there's coalitions for and against it, and it just kind of depends on who wins that battle. And we see it. I mean, we've seen it in craft beer for 20 years, and it could go one way or the other. So good luck to you.
And well, thank you. And I think that is one of the beauties of this is that we are accustomed to this in our laws changing up here or trying to advocate for change. I mean, we recently, don't quote me on this, but within the past 10 years have introduced Sunday sales into Minnesota. Like we can actually go and purchase beer on Sundays, which is a wonderful blue law that no longer exists. And it's also just the ability to have growlers on sites over a certain barrel age. So they have worked with us. We are their friends. I don't think that there's any appetite to put the genie back into the bottle at this point. So,
well, and since y'all have been doing this for a while, I mean, are you able to go to legislators and say like, okay, look, we've been doing this. Here's what's happened. Like, is there anything to support this argument of, hey, keeping it? Have y'all been logging like any data, I guess, on that front?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's primarily in the camp of Evan, our founder at Fair State. He's also a lawyer. So he rubs elbows with all the lawyer. And I really try to keep my lane over on launching the collective and just sort of playing in the space that we have been given. And
that's wise. You don't want to get your hands dirty and all that business.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you.
No. Well, can I help me explain? Is it to distribute it? Do you need like a special license, or how is it just the How does that work?
No, I mean, you really do. It requires experience and it requires infrastructure.
Right.
And I think for us, I mean, there really hasn't been a lot of regulation behind this, which is what they're working on. And I think that, yeah, the ability to come through, it really just, it requires a solid commitment and plan. And right now, our plan and commitment is to keeping it focused and tight with a very small, concentrated group of quality players.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And you can distribute to the off-premise in Minnesota, if I'm understanding correct.
That's correct. Yeah, we can. I mean, off-premise, it is not within the statute of what they are allowed to sell. There are certainly some off-premise who have picked it up, but a lot of that is, there's some different variables there. Whereas like if you have a glass separating or a separate entrance, or if you offer food, there's some language in there that really kind of helps with a lot of these establishments. So
okay. And then when you go into those off-premise accounts, do they kind of have a designated spot for you? Like where is the place you want to put it in those accounts?
Jordan's going to Minnesota in 2 weeks, so he wants to know exactly where to go.
No worries.
You got to pick up some Happi. We'll tell you all the distribution points, Rob, right?
All right.
Yeah, exactly. No, be sure
ears.
to reach. Yeah, it's typically in the back corner behind a dark curtain. You have to know the password. No, in fact, I mean, of the places that I have seen it, it's wonderful. Like there's great visibility. I've seen it in cooler placements to where you walk in and you're presented with a small but nice array of options. And so, I mean, yeah, I've also seen floor stacks. It really all kind of depends on the establishment. But no, I think that there's certainly a willingness to embrace this. And I think it won't be long before, especially with this new adult use bill, allowing the ability to sell in the off-premise, that I think you're going to find, there's going to be, we're certainly working on just setting up a tasting team that's built around cannabis and minor cannabinoids and the like. And so, soon you'll see cannabis beverage dinners and everything else. Like we have a lot of really fun plans that really all kind of center around just education and fun.
It sounds like craft beer 20 years ago when it's just getting started. And one final, Lisa, on branding, how do you go about branding? Is it similar to beer or is it a different? How do you approach that, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We have two sort of parts of our business. I think Happi is the overarching brand. We've got what we call our social flavors, which are meant to really be an alcohol replacement, right? Or to work with alcohol. So if my husband wants to have a beer, but I don't, and I don't want to have a glass of wine, and I'm not gender stereotyping, but that is quite often the use case that we get. Yeah. I would sit down and have a Happi, right? So rather than having kind of a seltzer water, it's infused, it's very healthy. We really knew our consumer. The interesting thing I will say about cannabis versus beer is there's a health and wellness component to cannabis, which is a little bit different than the alcohol industry. So like 50% of people who go into a dispensary go in because they have a specific need. They want to sleep. Literally sleep and pain and anxiety are the top 3 reasons people buy on that kind of wellness side. So we formulated a group, which we're excited to launch with Rob and his team in Minnesota, a group of functional beverages too, which are really designed against sort of 2 need states. Happi Glow is about kind of taking the edge off and releasing anxiety and stress in the afternoon. And then Happi Nightcap is meant to be that kind of evening drink you have before bed, which are really alternatives to edibles, which I think people are sort of taking now. And then we've got our social flavors, which we're launching 2 with the Chill State team in Minnesota, raspberry and lemon. And those are really meant to be kind of social consumption. So long way of answering, Harry, your question. We think about our consumer. We think about the occasions and the need states in which they are going to consume a cannabis beverage. And then we do in terms of the formulations and the Happi kind of parts of the Happi brand with that in mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's helpful because it is a need state. It's more like taking medicine rather than going after a flavor. Beer and seltzers are trying to get into that more, where this is our nighttime beer. But it does make more sense with cannabis. I would say that beer guys need to embrace this and be open to it. I think there's some old school thinking of circle the wagons, but the consumer always wins in the end. So I think having it structured like alcohol, that it's a licensed system, but it's more widely available than going to some strip mall and some shitty dispensary. I think that's the wrong way to do it. I think California and Colorado, the early adopters, are now seeing that. The black market is still rampant there. And anyway, look, I like to make speeches on these podcasts, and I apologize to you guys, but I don't have many friends. And so this is my time to really connect with people. So
I had one quick follow-up for you, Lisa.
Here we go.
No. So the 3 different need states that you were describing, could you see doing a variety pack of those, a 12 count variety pack of those 3, or is the price point maybe a little too high for something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jordan. And the answer is yes. And we right now have sleep and kind of anxiety. The other, sometimes people, especially in the beverage space, the other area people are looking as more of like a take it to the gym morning pick me up. I personally don't use cannabis that way, but there are a lot of people that actually do. So that's sort of in our innovation pipeline in our kind of functional beverage area. We're going to have hemp derived Happi for sale online. And to answer your question, we will have, in addition to being in all the distribution locations with Rob and his team in Minnesota, we have like a Happy to Meet You bundle, which has one of each kind of flavor. It's not a variety pack. It's we sell in 4 packs.
Okay.
We found that that's a better format than 6 packs for us because consumers like to be able to try a little bit first, and it keeps the price point down, to your point. So we've got four different flavors, and you can buy a Happy to Meet You bundle and taste each one of them. And that's at happyhourdrink.com. We're launching in 2 weeks after we launched with Minnesota and Rob next week, which is exciting.
Sweet.
I think that pre-workout is going to be bigger than anybody thinks. And clearly I don't work out, so I'm not in that culture, but I do know that is a big thing. And I could just see that combining the hydration and the cannabis in one step. I could see a lot of bros and chicks. Isn't that what people work out? I'm trying to be young again. My kids say I'm too thirsty. I don't even know what that means. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be on BeerNet Radio. It's the podcast where all your dreams come true. And so I hope that your dreams are coming closer to true today. And we'll see you. And if we get up to listen, I'm going to go on your website and just take a look and see if I can grab some of that Happi. That sounds like my speed. But all right, guys.
With an I, just so you know. But
okay.
Yeah, love to. 2 weeks. Happy with an I, and Happy Hour Drink will be live. So appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, guys, and take care.
Thanks, guys.
Wonderful.